welcome back to an Ode to Birth podcast. Today I'm here with Deslee, the Womb Witch on Instagram. And it's been 2 years since we had our last conversation. At the time, she was pregnant with her daughter. And I'd love to hand it over to you, Deslee. How are you doing? How is motherhood? If there's one thing that you're moving through right now that you feel like people can learn from, if you just want to be in this space of sharing. And then we'll get in some really good questions around herbalism and traditional Chinese medicine, because that's sort of your expertise.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I really am grateful to be here and happy to be here. And the last 2 years, I've been in the postpartum phase of my third child. We had our daughter 2 years ago. I had her in my 40s, so I was 41 and a half when she was born. So I took quite a extensive postpartum time, and I did that intentionally. So I set up myself before having her to be able to completely rest for a full 6 weeks after giving birth. And what that looked like for me was staying upstairs in the bedroom as much as possible. I didn't leave the house for the 6 weeks. So we had, my husband doing food runs and doing most of the cooking if I didn't have things that were pre-frozen, and meals prepared. We had lots of people come to drop off food. Visitors would come up to the bedroom and visit for a little bit while I was resting in bed. I spent a little bit of time. We have two other kids, so they often, instead of me coming downstairs and being with, two very busy young children, they ended up, having their quiet time upstairs. We did some movies on a laptop in the bedroom, and I just took that full 6 weeks to really, really rest unapologetically. And I think that really served me in the time from then until now. Helping me to recuperate my energy and bring my vitality back. I think also the postpartum phase, we're often told it's 6 weeks and then you get the clear to just go ahead. And I found with all three of my pregnancies that it really did take a full 2 years for my energy to really feel like it has returned. And now that I'm at the 2-year mark again with this last birth, I finally feel like I'm able to hold enough energy to be able to take that in service outside of my home again. So it really does take a long time. In traditional Chinese medicine, they even say it takes actually 3 years for you to fully regain the qi and the blood that you lose during pregnancy and then birthing and then nursing, because in traditional Chinese medicine, you usually nurse, for 2 or 3 years at the minimum. And it does take that long to build your vitality and your qi and your blood back. So even from, idealistic traditional Chinese medicine recommendations is like you space your children out 3 years apart, even just to make sure you have enough for the next pregnancy. So
that's so
yeah.
wonderful. I have heard that about the importance of resting in bed as long as you possibly can, naked, bare-breasted, with your baby naked, chest to chest, just to help with that nursing dynamic and breastfeeding dynamic. And having a good, strong flow requires you to be chest to chest with your baby resting.
Yes.
And
yes.
When we're interrupting this process of rest and, like you said, recuperation, regaining our vitality, that's when I've noticed some women have challenges with nursing, and that relationship is a little bit interrupted when we are just trying to get back into our usual routine, whatever that was before the baby was born.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think our society really pushes mothers to get back into things. And especially if this is your second or third pregnancy and birth, you have children and there's a lot of guilt about not being available. I've seen mothers, just lined up for brunch and their baby's like 1 week old or a few days old, and they're just back out, and there's such a strong, even if it's not overtly, although there is a lot of overt messaging, but it's even covertly messaging us to like just get back and forget about our bodies and get back to real life. And really, you just gave birth. That is really as most real life as you're ever going to get. Um, and creating that space for yourself as a protected container for your baby to land, for you to come back and land after the birthing process, for your family to settle in a new dynamic, either if it was just you and your partner and now you have a baby, or maybe there's other children, they need time to adjust. So, even outside of the traditional Chinese medicine perspective, even, looking at if you're taking your life, wanting to live it with intention and bring more ritual and intention into your life, it's creating that container for yourself as everybody lands after the birthing process. It's really so important. From traditional Chinese medicine, it makes a huge difference also in our health down the road when we go into menopause. So often when there's menopausal issues that are coming up, the root cause from traditional Chinese medicine is a depletion that happened during childbirth. And it starts to resurface itself when we start to change again through the menopause process. So that was my prime motivation, just from what I learned from studying. So when I had my first child, we took like a good 21 days to rest, and with the next child. And then my third one, we learned a little bit more about how to create that space well. But it was a motivating factor for not just now in our family, but my future health as I go through the transition into menopause.
Amazing. And this is new to me. I haven't heard of this concept before. I have heard of women encapsulating their placenta and then also tincturing their placenta with the hopes that the properties of this tincture could support them through the hormonal changes in menopause. So this is the first time I've heard of the importance of integrating and being in that resting period as long as you possibly can, so that it doesn't so that it can impact your menopausal period in a good way, in a positive way.
Yeah, even I hear so many folks I speak to that end up having menstrual issues even after having children. So maybe they had no problems leading up to getting pregnant, but then they've had their child, their period has returned, and now all of a sudden it's very different than it was before they had their child. And often when I'm asking more questions to kind of find the root of what's causing their issue, it really is coming down most of the time to like a depletion that happened after childbirth. They just started doing too much too soon, and their body needed more nourishment to recover.
And now, are you saying that there's a lot of women are then experiencing more amenorrhea or the opposite, like heavy periods? And what's going
It,
on hormonally there?
it can be a range. It depends on the person's balance. Off like the more common ones I see are like PMDD, so very severe premenstrual symptoms and depression and anxiety that come up, and sometimes a lot of rage that really comes up, and they feel very off balance right before they get their period. Other times it can be really heavy periods or painful periods. Some women experience fibroids afterwards, which can be like a stagnation or coagulation of qi and blood from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective. Those are the more common ones, just really noticeable PMS difference. They feel just really not themselves for that time, kind of after ovulation and into their period time. So it can be hormone fluctuations, it can be energetic fluctuations, and very often it's rooted in just like a depletion. Their body is deficient. And so from the traditional Chinese medicine theory, their organ theory, certain organs are deficient either in qi or in blood, or which is causing an imbalance within the organ system.
And when we're in this place of depression or anxiety, it's easy to just spiral and it's like, no, I don't have the energy to take care of myself. I'm just gonna, get this bowl of crappy cereal or whatever. And then you're just spiraling into these habits that are not actually nourishing for your body when you are postpartum. If
Yes.
you don't mind sharing a little bit of some nutrition in this, yeah, at this time, or some different herbs that can really support women. I have heard of dongguai, if I'm saying it
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah.
I've also heard of shatavari being really good for helping the emotional and mental body in the postpartum period. But if there's any more you could speak to.
Yeah, I mean, from the traditional Chinese medicine herbs, it's really hard to recommend like a general herb for everybody because they work very specifically on the individual. They have to look at their constitution, what's going on in their body and the situation. So it's hard for those. What I moved into is working with actually more Western and local herbs because I live in Canada, I live here in Ontario. So it felt to try and ship herbs that don't normally grow here, it seemed like a lot. And I wanted to cultivate relationships with the plants that were growing around me. So as far as that goes, it's a little bit easier to recommend a few generalized herbs, and those would be gentle tonifying herbs. Ones like stinging nettle. Sometimes it can be red clover is a really nice one. Comfrey leaf can be good, especially for those that are over 40. Raspberry leaf is a very common one. So those, oat straw would be another one. So those are very gentle herbs. And you would take them in more than just a tea. You would want to make an infusion, which is like a very, very strong brewed tea over several hours. So you're drinking it as a medicine rather than just like a cup of tea. So those can be really nourishing. As far as foods go in the postpartum time, and these would be the same foods that you would want to eat around menstruation time as well, because they're both very nourishing. I'm a big proponent on if you can and you're not fully hardcore vegan, then I really believe in eating organ meat. It's really, we get certain qi and blood and nourishment, collagen from, meat that we don't often are able to get with non-meat products. For those people that are very dead set on being vegan, there are a few things you can do that I can't think of right now. There's a few combinations that you can do, but you really have to research it. It is really, really hard to do. So, excuse me, I often go with meat. So like bone broths, liver's a hard one. You can get often liver capsules because people don't like to eat them so much. I like to make liver pate because I prefer to make your own food as much as you can and think of the food as medicine. So even if you're not used to eating meat, if you look at preparing certain foods like a bone broth or a liver pate and think about it as nourishing medicine for a period of time, and then maybe after you're not nursing anymore, or after you've recovered from postpartum, you can go back into doing less meat for yourself after that. But those are my big ones, like bone broth, liver, stews, warm foods, trying to stay away from raw vegetables, raw fruits. So it's lots of steamed things. Just trying to keep your body really, really warm. Ginger is a really common food from traditional Chinese medicine and herb that's used in the postpartum phase and also in the menstruation phase to warm ourselves as well. So it's put into food and soups and stews, and you can also chop up some of the root and just brew it in a pot for about half an hour and drink that.
And while you're drinking that and eating all these warm and nourishing foods, you are wearing warm, fuzzy socks, and you are also you have a scarf around your neck because there is a wind gate. I remember I was reflecting on our conversation from last time about the wind gate at the back of the neck. And then there's also a lot of meridians along the feet that we want to keep safe and protected and warm as womb holders. It's really important. So that's what I was learning from you last time. And maybe you want to elaborate again on these different parts of the body that we should be keeping warm if we have a womb.
Yes, yeah, the feet are a big one. The kidney 1 point is right at the bottom of the feet on the sole of the foot. It's the only point that opens at the very bottom of our foot. The rest of them are at the top. And so when we walk on a cold surface, that cold enters straight through the kidney 1 point and goes all the way up the kidney meridian, which is up the inside of the legs, and goes right into the uterus. So After birth and during menstruation, our uteruses are very open and very susceptible to cold. And in traditional Chinese medicine, cold can easily get trapped in the body. So walking on a cold surface, even in the summertime, it can bring the cold into the body and bring cold into the uterus. A very common root diagnosis from traditional Chinese medicine for people that are having fertility issues is a cold uterus. And so you want the uterus, if you think about like the earth, when it's cold and winter, everything's condensed and frozen, it's like very hard. A seed doesn't want to germinate in that kind of a soil. It wants to germinate in soil that is moist and aerated and warm, and that's when you get the seeds growing. So our uterus is the same way when we're growing seeds of life.
So many reflections within nature. I was out for a walk this morning, and where we're at right now is we're coming into spring, and the tulips are just starting to come out, and all these plants, you can see a little bit of green poking out. I think it's a really beautiful time. For me, I feel like when we go to conceive, this would be a really lovely time to be birthing. I feel like this would be gestating throughout the winter, birthing in the spring and summer. So we'll see whatever universe wants for us and for our time. And thank you so much for sharing this knowledge around staying warm, staying nourished throughout trying to conceive and throughout the postpartum period as well. I do have a burning question for you, Deslee, and it's around immunity and staying healthy in pregnancy. Obviously, it's not fun when we have a cold or a flu, but I did have a client inquire yesterday. She was in a little bit of anxiety, feeling like, oh no, is this pregnancy safe? I'm still in my first trimester and I have a little bit of a fever. So if you don't mind just speaking to that.
Sure. I mean, specifically with the fever, it would really depend on a couple of things. Like one, how high the fever is in that first phase of pregnancy. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when fever spikes super, super high, it can, cause or be the start of a miscarriage just because the body temperature gets too hot. Usually after second trimester, you have a little bit more safety, generally speaking, around that. It would also depend on the individual person's constitution and the pregnancy itself. So if a pregnancy is really strong inside the body, it's really anchored into the body, then a little bit of a fever is not going to be what will cause problems in the pregnancy. So it is kind of an individual basis on how much to risk or how much risk it would be. My advice with most people when I speak to them is to always come back into your own intuition. So for example, this client that you have that has asked a question, what I would say would be for her to just take some time and try and check in with herself, to talk to the spirit of the baby, just take some breaths, root that breath down into her womb, and just really try and calmly check in with her body and check in with the spirit of the baby and just say, are you okay? Is there anything you need that I can support you at this time? And she may get a craving of a certain food, or she may see a certain herb that she knows or tea bag that she knows. And just to kind of listen to herself, because her inner body and the spirit of that baby will let her know what will nourish her to keep everything as safe as possible. As far as like immunity, keeping our immunity during pregnancy and fevers, my personal opinion around fevers is to let the fever do its job rather than trying to take things to bring down a fever, especially when we're pregnant. If we're taking certain medications, there's always a risk involved in taking any kind of a medication when we're pregnant. So you want to just be sure to really know what you're taking if you're deciding to do that. My personal opinion is to just leave it and stay hydrated and rest. I have a cold right now, so it's funny that we're talking about immunity. So my first pregnancy, I didn't take any herbs at all. I wanted to just keep it as clear as I could. And then in my second pregnancy, I had everything that you could possibly get, including a really pesky sinus infection. So I ended up in that pregnancy really turning to herbs and learning a lot about which herbs are safe in pregnancy and which are maybe less safe, and then having the personal experience of going through it. Most often, when you look up herbs for pregnancy, there's just kind of an across the board, like, don't take it during pregnancy. And I think the reason why that is we don't have any studies or many studies of which herbs are safe, because people don't test on pregnant people for herbs. So we don't have the evidence. So our culture likes to go with evidence and studies and how are things done. So it's hard to find information online. What I ended up doing was speaking to traditional herbalists and just asking who has experience with these herbs, because a lot of these herbs have been used for hundreds or thousands of years with women who are pregnant and midwives who are supporting them. So there is information you can find if you look. And I just ended up finding some places I trusted to see who had experience, and then I tried them out myself. So my all-time favorite and safe herb for when you're getting sick or when you have an infection is Echinacea root. And this is a very common plant that grows over, I think, most of North America. So it's local, and I think it grows in Europe as well. So it's a pretty local herb. My favorite way to take it is in tincture form. So they take the root of the plant, and it's a more mature plant, older than 4 years old. There's a few different types of echinacea. My favorite one is Echinacea angustifolia, which has a bit more stronger potency of inside the root of the herb. So I take the tincture. It's safe in pregnancy. I've used it myself quite a bit in pregnancy, and then also in the postpartum phase. I've also used it in my children, just to, like, I warm up the liquid so there's alcohol is kind of burns off of it, and I add it to maybe a smoothie or something for them. So it's a pretty safe herb, and what it does is it activates our immune system by increasing our white blood cell production. So if we have an active infection, then it's really helpful for that to help kill any kind of infection.
Oh, amazing. And I have heard of women using it in the postpartum period as well, if they feel as though, these superficial tears can happen during the pushing process. As our perineum stretches, there can be these micro tears. The first and second degree tears can heal very well on their own. And women will often use echinacea to support their immunity, get those white blood cells moving through their body so that it reduces the chance of infection down there in the healing tissues of the perineum. So not only can it be used in the pregnancy, but also in the postpartum. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Echinacea. It's probably one of the herbs that I always have in my medicine cabinet ready just in case, because at the onset of any kind of infection, it's great to take. So yeah, great for tears. I would say my experience with it is that it doesn't work amazing as a prophylactive. So if you're taking it beforehand, so not to get infection, it perhaps doesn't work so well. But if you're in a situation where you have an open wound and you start to feel it get a little bit itchy or a little irritated at the start of an infection, that would be the perfect time to start taking it. Because infection can spread, and you can end up, with the chills and the fever. I also really love Echinacea postpartum for mastitis, because that is a common thing that happens when the milk ducts get blocked and infection starts to build. So Echinacea is a great one for that. And another favorite one that I love, which would work for tears or mastitis when there's an infection, is garlic. And most of us have it at home. It's a really amazing herb to kill bacterial infections, and it works, within 20, 30 minutes of taking a clove. I just chop it up and eat it with a little bit of olive oil or honey. Works amazing for infections.
And then immediately having to maybe brush your teeth if you are trying to impress anyone after, or you
Yeah.
just let your garlic breath be
Just
free.
let it go. Just be in the garlic.
It's so awesome. Well, yeah, I just love being in conversation with you, and I always learn so much. There has been a question recently within the fields around ectopic pregnancy. And I had a woman reach out to me saying that she was, I don't know the full story, but I guess she was getting declined care in her small town for the situation. And so she's like, how do I release this pregnancy that is ectopic? Or what can I do if I get into uh, medical support and they have a procedure to remove the ectopic pregnancy? What can I do to then balance my hormones in that postpartum period? um, I like to say, even if it is an ectopic pregnancy or there's miscarriage or termination, um, it is still a birth in the end. It's just a
Mhm.
different outcome. It's just a
Yeah.
different outcome. So we would want to treat ourselves as if we would be in any postpartum period. So do you mind speaking to that, Deslee, just around ectopic pregnancy? If you have any sort of information or intuitively, what are you hearing about that?
Yeah, of course. I think ectopic pregnancy, just like you said, it's in the same realm as miscarriage and termination and birth and menstruation. There's a loss happening of qi and blood from the traditional Chinese medicine perspective, so there needs to be a time of recovery and recuperation. I often recommend the same kind of foods, similar kind of herbs, maybe adding in a few just to soothe the heart with a pregnancy loss, even if it was a chosen termination. There's still a bit of a loss that you experience. So they're all in the same realm, and I openly talk about that I've had 2 terminations in my life, and I've had 3 miscarriages as well. So they are similar. The period of time might be a little shorter than after gestating for a full 9 months. So it really depends if there's a miscarriage, how long it was that when it happened, just to judge. And a good thing is to just listen to your body and take as much time as you need to rest and recover. With an ectopic pregnancy, the additional thing would be that there would be tissue damage. So you'd want to just care and nurse that in the beginning phases. So just keeping it warm but not too hot, trying to avoid the cold again, because the cold will really constrict the tissues and add to perhaps creating any extra scar tissue and that sort of thing involved. So just resting, not doing any heavy lifting, any heavy movements or quick movements, just giving that time for the tissues to recover. In traditional Chinese medicine, when the tissues are damaged, they say it takes 100 days to recover. So that's kind of a good guideline to give yourself before you really jump back into anything. If you're a pretty active person before and your body really wants to move, then obviously go ahead and do that, but maybe do it at like 60-70% and just keep yourself held back a little bit before going back in, so you can keep the tissues healing as much as possible. As far as herbs would go, I would look personally, if it was me, at taking some comfrey leaf infusion. Comfrey leaf is a funny herb. There's a lot of controversy around taking it, and the reason why is that there's an alkaloid contained in the root that they say can damage your liver. And where that information comes from is that they did a study, they extracted this alkaloid and gave it to rats in a concentrated form, and they noticed that there was liver damage. So um, depending on what perspective you can take, it's hard to say, yes, it does damage the liver, but in what ratio do you need to take it, and what happens when it's in the synergistic combination of all of the other alkaloids contained within the plant. However, the leaf has much less content of the alkaloid, and it's been used for many, many years, hundreds, perhaps even thousands of years. safely and over long periods of time. So if it was me personally, I would be taking comfrey leaf infusion, maybe not on a daily basis, but maybe 2 or 3 times out of the week, I would be drinking that. Comfrey's traditional name is called knit bone. So it actually stitches together our bones and our soft tissue. It's really great for healing internally, especially if you have a cut and you put comfrey oil on top. You can sometimes heal the top layer and then you may trap an infection inside. But when we're talking about an ectopic pregnancy where there's a lot of, potential damage internally, I would be drinking comfrey leaf. And then maybe after the 100 days period, I would be going to doing some castor oil packs and kind of doing those fairly regularly. Castor oil is a great medicine just on the skin. I wouldn't drink it internally, but just on the skin, and it absorbs in through the skin, and it is very good at breaking up stagnation, in particular adhesions and scar tissues. So I would be looking at that. Down the road, if I was trying to get pregnant again and there was any kind of difficulties or they did any imaging and they found scar tissue blocking certain areas, then another medicine I would look to would be chickweed. And chickweed is a really gentle medicine. It's very connected to the maiden aspect of the Maiden Mother Crone trilogy. And it is really helpful for breaking up stagnation internally, especially good for cysts and cooling cysts, but I would probably be using that at some point down the road if I needed to.
So amazing. I wish I should have reached out to you when I was, I had this massive cyst the size of a grapefruit on my right ovary. And they had discovered it when it was only, maybe 3 centimeters. And I worked on it as much as I could, possibly months, just talking to my body, trying to do the inner work, trying to take all the things. But I didn't hear about this herb that you're speaking to. So I wonder if, I also did discover that in German New Medicine, they speak to ovarian cysts being this manifestation in the body if you're experiencing the loss of a loved one, or the loss of a pet even. And 2 years ago, or 3 years, close to 3 years ago now, my brother passed away. And I hadn't yet discovered that this could be the manifestation of losing a loved one. And I just learned this after the surgery. So they went in and did a cystectomy and cleared the cyst. I had another one on my left ovary as well. And I'm in curiosity now, just thinking like, I wonder if maybe I had just given it time to do what it had to do in order, right? But I was afraid of it rupturing and, right? And this is what the doctors were afraid of too. Anyways, so that was a bit of a sidetrack there, but I am nervous that these cysts could come back as a result of me not letting it do its thing and play out whatever process it one needed to play out. But having this knowledge now, I am going in and trying to recover this relationship that I have with the loss of my brother, and like tuning into my womb and letting her know that it is sad, but we are in this process of integration and learning about this new reality and coming to this new reality, and it is okay and I am safe. And so just these affirmations to let my womb know that, we're good. And I don't need any more cysts, please. And I could be speaking to these plant allies. And so you were mentioning, was it chickweed?
Yeah, chickweed is a really great herb for cysts. I'm sorry to hear about your brother. And I find German New Medicine, I don't know a lot about it yet. I'm learning about it, but I find it very fascinating. There's a few things that just really, they just really connect. So it's just adding another layer of understanding how our body works that I find really fascinating. And just to speak to like the worry, which is understandable that you have, because the way that our system works, it's very based on percentages and likelihoods and statistics. And if it gets past a certain, just a cyst gets past a certain level, then statistically has a higher chance of rupturing. So it's all understandable based on how that system works. However, the thing that I love about our bodies is that our bodies are dynamic and they're moving and shifting all the time, and that you came to that awareness even after the surgery. You still came to the awareness, you're still doing the work, you're still closing whatever needs to be closed around your process with losing your brother. And so it's entirely possible that you won't have another cyst. Often I find these things are reoccurring, but they often happen because when you choose to cut something like a fibroid or a cyst out, and then if we're not doing the work, that the releasing work that's also involved, then of course it would have a chance of coming back. But if you are doing the releasing work involved, our bodies are very dynamic. So it's not to say, perhaps you might not have an ongoing issue because you're still looking at it and working with it right now. Comfrey root would be good if it was me going through that. I would do some castor oil packs. So just working with castor oil just to keep everything moist and lubricated and moving in that area, because cysts can sometimes leave a little residue of adhesions or scar tissue in the area. And then if you have an active cyst, they're often hot in nature, and so chickweed is the herb that can be really helpful. It's very cooling. It's a gentle herb. People often break it off and put it in their salad. This is the time of year that it grows. So it's going to be coming out of the ground in early spring. Grows very close to the ground, has beautiful little tiny white flowers. When we get past kind of middle spring into summer, it gets too hot for the herb, and the herb kind of stays lower to the ground, but you don't often pick it after that time. So have a look around. I had a neat little experience with Comfrey just before I got pregnant, actually, because I was suspecting that I was feeling a little hot in my womb area, and I wasn't sure if I was having a cyst for sure, but I was just feeling like maybe Comfrey was something that I might be needing. And I happened to look out in my backyard, and that year there was it was growing next to the fence and on the grass and over here. And I was like, what is this plant? It's everywhere all of a sudden. And I looked up what the flower was, and it was Comfrey. Or sorry, not Comfrey. It was chickweed. So it's funny, like the plants that you need, they're often showing up right outside your door. So when you're feeling off and you need something, and you're in a season where things are growing, just go outside and look in your yard, or if you don't have a yard, walk to your nearest park and see what catches your attention, because it's often exactly the medicine that you need.
It's so true. Mother Nature, she's always speaking to us, and I like to think that we have this telepathic connection and ways of communicating with the land around us. And I spoke to Queen Anne's lace a few years back when, my lover and I were in a really lovely situation. My body is very fertile. I woke up the next morning and I'm like, okay, Queen Anne's lace, where are you? I know I shouldn't be working with you all the time, but I'm ready to work with you in this moment. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being this really beautiful morning. We went for a walk. We were traveling just on the road, and we ended up in this really desolate area. There was a smoothie/cafe. Not many plants around. I mean, there's plants everywhere, but we were walking up to this cafe, and just it seemed to be the only plant that was growing around the building was this Queen Anne's lace, wild carrot seed just sprawling up the door, greeting us as we are. It's just so funny how she came to me in those moments after I had actually, in my mind's eye, seen her and was like, I need to work with you. So I've had very similar occurrences with these plant allies. And in working with Queen Anne's lace, I discovered it to be quite potent. very powerful. Noticing this like vaginal discharge and mucus afterwards was a clear evidence that she was moving through me. And I was then working with specific amenagogues close to the time that I would be bleeding, to just kind of help promote the flow and encourage my moon to come down. And this is a protocol that I took upon myself. I did my own research, my own reading, and again, use my intuition. And this is something that I feel like a lot more women and men are starting to tune into, working with these plant allies so that we can have a better idea of how to take care of our reproductive health and our fertility as well. Maybe we can segue into that, if you don't mind, Deslee, just speaking around implantation preventers, ovulation control, if there's any of this within traditional Chinese medicine that you want to share with the audience today.
Yeah, there's a few that you can work with. And again, it's best to do a lot of your own reading just to see what's the best fit for you. Queen Anne's lace, working with the seeds around ovulation time, is a great one to prevent implantation. There's other ones that you can take. Mugwort is sometimes used. Blue and black cohosh together is sometimes used as a synergistic combination. Really getting to know your cycle is probably the best thing that you can use instead of trying to outsource from the plants. Those are good supports to have when you need them. Like, things happen and we all need to lean on the plants. But following your cycle is probably the best for your own knowledge. So just knowing exactly when you're ovulating. If you don't want to get pregnant, doing your best to just stay. The window isn't actually huge. It's only a couple of days, really. So just try, if you really, really don't want to get pregnant, do your best to stay away at that time. Going to probably Queen Anne's lace would be my favorite for stopping implantation. There's a few, what else can you do? There's a few points on the meridian. So you're looking at, I think, spleen 6, which is on the inside of the leg, is a good point to move blood in the uterus. So I would probably work on massaging that point leading up to the period's arrival. Another one, I'm trying to think what the other one is. There's another kidney point that I can't think of right now what it would be. I'll have to come back around to that one. I think it's kidney, could be kidney 4 or 5, but I'll have to double check on that one. But spleen 6 would probably be my go-to, as well as Queen Anne's lace. I would be drinking mugwort infusions, leading up to my period. Also talking to like any spirits and just like having an openness or a closedness to them coming. So that can help sometimes too.
So in your work as a mother, as an herbalist, as a witch, what's something that's been really on your heart recently that you feel like the collective could benefit from you sharing about, or just from personal experiences in this postpartum period? It's been 2 years. But yeah, I'd love to just hear from you from a more personal level, anything that's in your field that you feel like others could benefit from hearing.
Sure. I had my doula in my first pregnancy. We were having a couple of sessions before my oldest was born, and she brought this concept of surrender to me at that time. So the idea was surrendering because I was pushing to do so much in the pregnancy phase, and I was having a hard time with not being able to do as much as I used to. So she brought in this idea of surrender, and she said it's going to help you through the birthing process and then throughout motherhood. And this conversation that I had with her, she's a beautiful woman named Nicole Angela that was an incredible support for me through my first two births. That conversation has stayed with me now for almost 9 years. This idea of surrender, and it was through the first birth, through the first postpartum, going from 1 to 2 kids, now going into 2 to 3 kids. And our last 2 years on my personal level has not been what we originally planned. I originally planned to take a year off and then get back into working. And our middle child has needed a lot more support outside of the school system. So I have had to reorient how I do my work in order to be home and support him as well. So this whole idea of surrendering is kind of coming back. And I think it's a helpful thing to remember in motherhood and in the postpartum phase and beyond. Because life doesn't always work out the way you want it to, but especially in motherhood, the more you can surrender and stay open-hearted and gentle with yourself and gentle with your family, then the easier the ride can be. And the other thing that has been coming around is that prior to children, I did quite deep spiritual work. I lived in Peru for a long time, and I was participating in various ceremonies and holding various circles and ceremonies. And then into motherhood, I tried to keep that going and bring babies to ceremonies and keep doing these things. And now I have 3 children, and some of them need a lot of support right now, and it's just hard to go and do ceremonies. It's even hard for me to go to a retreat or take a night to myself. So the lesson that has been coming throughout motherhood and even deeper now is that is the spiritual work. So, we are the birthers of life. And that is probably one of the deepest, most spiritual things you can do. Even if you're not birthing and you're menstruating, you're still part of that cycle that we all have. And if we can remain connected to ourselves and our intuition, remain connected to the earth and our well ancestors during those times in the most mundane ways, caring for our family members, cooking the food, cleaning the toilets, wiping the bums, that is the work. You can go off and have this incredibly amazing spiritual retreat experience, but what happens when you're, in the weeds at home and everything is disheveled and everybody is falling apart? And how do you stay connected in that moment? So I've been really dropping in personally in this last year to like the spiritual practice within motherhood. It seems like a small thing, and it seems so overlooked in our society of production, but I was just writing to someone today, it's like playing the long game, because you are doing this work now for your family or for the young people in your community, and 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, that work will blossom. And it can be some of the most deeply spiritual work you can do. The third thing I've been really dropping into has been just working on my lineage and my ancestry. For me in particular, I've been looking at my matrilineal side, so all of my mother, my grandmother, and the whole line of grandmothers. I was quite connected to my father's line, which is Hungarian, but I don't. There's a break in my mother's line, which is mostly Irish and English. So I've just been dropping into my own ancestral practices, working to reclaim my own ancestral knowledge and medicine practices as best I can. So that's just the third thing I've been working on.
Wow, I just have, as you're speaking to motherhood being one of the greatest ceremonies of all, could feel these tears welling up in my eyes. And it's so true. There's a part of me in my maiden era that doesn't ever want to stop going to ceremonies and doesn't ever want to, move away from these really powerful spiritual practices. But when you think about it, if you have 3 kids running around, 2 of them are puking, this one's screaming, like that's an ayahuasca ceremony right there in itself. And
Yeah.
this is every day.
Yes, exactly.
So
I remember experiencing quite a bit of grief for missing out on the spiritual work. And I took it to my own, like I just did a little full moon thing at my house, just lit a candle and had to cry, and like I miss it and it sucks, and all I'm doing is wiping diapers. And it was like a loud and clear, like, this is the work. Like, you're in it. It's ceremony every day. Cleaning bumps.
and as the children grow older, I'm sure we'll come to this moment where we're in this wild woman phase. And circling back to what we started with around menopause. And I've come to learn the term moon pause, which is really special.
Oh.
Yeah. And so coming to this moon pause era where we are in our wild woman, lots of things are changing and we're transitioning into the crone. This is where we can come back to those practices that we were really close with in our maiden era almost, because the kids are way older now and they're doing their own thing. And so I see that within my mother right now, because we're older now, and she's going off traveling and discovering parts of herself, rediscovering parts of herself, and really coming home into her body because she doesn't have to worry so much about us now that we're older. And I'm sure, we'll come to this for ourselves. And I just really value these conversations and they light me up. And I feel this connection with you, Deslee, even though we've only been able to speak virtually. I do feel this like witchy sister energy with you. And I appreciate these conversations. If you want to share before we close the conversation with the audience in what you're doing now in your offerings, if there's anything that you want to speak to there.
Sure. Yeah. I'll just also, before I say that I really appreciate our connection too. And I really honor that. We haven't met in person yet, but I'm sure we will one day. And I feel the sisterhood with you for sure. As far as offerings go right now, I have 3 things because I'm a busy mother. I've worked on getting things up and online as much as I can. So I used to run a plant medicines for menstruators course, and it was a live course where you learn how to interact with the plants on an intuitive level. So you're connecting into your womb and you're journeying with the plants. You're having your own experience with the plants where they're telling you maybe what they might be useful for. And then after you have that journey experience, then we go into the medicinal properties of the herbs. So you can start to learn through practice that the intuition and the intuitive information that you're receiving from the plants is actually right. Because often whatever you get information-wise from the plants during the journey, it's somehow connected to how they're used medicinally. So I really love that course. I'm not able to teach it live, so I've just put it up on a platform now where you can do it at your own pace in a self-study class. So it's 4 modules going through the different phases of our menstrual phase and the lunar phase, and it's connected to different herbs each week or each module that you do. So that's one course that I have up. It's pretty much ready to go up now. The second course that I have, I'm building and should be ready shortly, is a herbal course that is can be used for anybody, but it's focused mostly for busy moms and learning just basic herbs that you can use for yourself and your family, how to build your family's apothecary, how to work with the plants. For example, if your child wakes up in the middle of the night with an ear infection, instead of having to wait for the pharmacy to open or to get to a doctor for a prescription, just knowing what herbs you can use right away to help them. And that's short videos, less than, I think, 30 minutes each video. And then there's an easy find chart. So if your child has a cough, you can see the herbs that you could potentially use and then choose from that list. And then some recipe cards for how you can easily make your own medicines at home. So that's the second course that should be up shortly. And the other way I like to work with folks, which is one of my favorite ways, is just on one-on-one, because every case is individual. So if there's a specific issue that somebody has, either with their fertility, postpartum, or menstrual or menopause, perimenopause phase, and they want to work with me one-on-one, I just recently launched on-demand sessions. So instead of meeting face-to-face live, we just go back and forth over video messenger, where they can tell me what's going on. I can ask any questions. We go back and forth until we feel like we have enough information, and then I can recommend herbs that they can use and source, foods that they can use, and then any type of medical qigong prescription exercises to support them with their menstrual issues. So it's just like a one-on-one session live, but we do it over video and email.
Oh, thank you. You are just a gift. We're so grateful. So grateful for your medicine and for your offerings and for your experiences. And it's an absolute honor to be with you today. And thank you for sharing some time and some insights that you've had in the last 2 years after the birth of your third child, your daughter. And I want to wish you a really lovely afternoon, Deslee. And I know we're going to talk again soon. So take care.
We will, most definitely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Deslee. I'm going to close the recording now and get going with my day. And I'll be in touch with you just around some logistics. And if you want to send me some information as to how people can be in contact with you and receive your offerings, just send that to me. Either you can email me or Instagram DM is totally fine as well.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for having me. It's nice to talk again.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. I have a feeling we're going to see each other in person. I don't know where, when.
I know. Well, out west has been calling me for a while. My aunt lives in just outside of Calgary. So I'm trying to think of a way to get my kids out that way. And then once we're out there, we'll probably keep going.
I wonder, well, yeah, please come out. Come to the Pacific Northwest. I'm in Vancouver area. There's also some really amazing festivals going on.
Oh, cool.
There's one in Golden, British Columbia, which is close to Alberta. But yeah, maybe we'll see each other at a festival. That'd be really
that would
fun.
be lovely.
Like a women's festival, you can bring your kids. And
yeah, I would love that. I just took my kids to Scotland on my own in the fall. So now I've done that. I'm like, oh, where else can we go?
Wow, good for you. We can do it. Hey, that's how
Yeah.
I do see myself traveling with kids, like on my own. I'm sure my partner would have something to say about that, but I'm like, no, I got this.
I just did it. My husband was working, so he couldn't go, and I needed to go there, so I just took them, and then after I booked the tickets, I was like, did I really just do this? Am I crazy? But it was great, and I would totally do it again.
I'm so inspired by you. I love it. Well, take care and feel better soon.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.